Welcome to the Million Vegan Grandmothers podcast. And today I have James Wilson from New Zealand, who transitioned from a cattle and sheep farming to veganism after reading one of Esselstyn's books and having chronic health issues himself and being on medication that he was quite concerned about. So welcome, James.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Nice to be here.
And you've written a book called Plant Paradigm. You sent that book to Dr. Sailesh Rao, and he invited you to our convergence that's coming up on November 9th and 10th.
That's correct. Yes.
Yeah.
We swapped books.
Great. So tell me a little bit about yourself and your transition and when that happened.
Well, I was a fourth generation sheep and beef farmer, totally convinced that the world depended on meat for food, and brought up with that. Brought my children up eating three meat meals a day, and then later in life, I suffered the second of two pulmonary embolisms and was prescribed warfarin to take on a regular basis. And I hated the effect that warfarin had on me, and I was frightened of what it might do to me, because in those days I was tramping in the bush a lot, dealing with rats and killing the rats with warfarin. And so then, quite coincidentally, I heard an interview with Dr. Caldwell Esselstyn about how I can live on a plant-based whole food diet. And I was so convinced by him, I announced we would be vegan from there on. And I convinced my wife to come with me. And then I read voraciously of all the books I could get my hands on, and convinced myself that this is the way to go. And here I am, 15, 16 years later. So many of my friends and acquaintances of my age have gone through non-communicable diseases. And so I'm more convinced than ever. And if I can go on from there, if I may,
Yes,
as I was considering this, and then I finally wrote a book about it. So I started evangelizing with it, which in fact meant I lost as many friends as I've gained. But I worked it out that there was, and this is, I'm quite proud of this, that I wrote the book about 6 or 7 years ago, that there are three legs to the stool. One is human health, which is which converted me. The next one was the environment, which I'm very, very concerned about. And the third one is cruelty to animals. So I'm well versed in all the three, in that I was terrified I was going to die anyway. And the environment is what I really concern myself with nowadays. And I subjected livestock to cruelty for most of my life. And so I've by confining them and killing them and eating them. And so those are the three pillars, I say, that support the principles of veganism.
right. We call it the heal path, human, earth, and animal liberation. And so we're working towards liberating humans and earth and animals. And
I didn't know that. That's very good.
yeah, it's a nice acronym for what we're doing as vegans, And I just did a beautiful interview with Janet O'Shea. She's a professor at UCLA, accomplished writer and teacher and musician. And she said that sometimes it's hard to come to terms with this because we have to come to terms with that we're both victim and perpetrator at the same time. So we've been preyed upon with the idea that we need meat as part of our diet to be strong and that we need to partake in everything that comes with that. And also, we're the ones doing it by supporting it for so long. And so it's coming to terms with a lot. But once you do, how has your life changed? So tell us what has happened since you have really educated yourself in, really we've been hoodwinked. We've been lied to. And it's, you just follow the money. You follow the money.
Absolutely. Yeah, being fourth generation of farming and thriving on it, and yeah, and believing implicitly that it was such an important aspect of New Zealand and our livelihoods. I had to make a dramatic change because it wasn't just my pleasure in eating meat, but the income I derived from it and all the surrounding bits of it. So it was a significant move to change, and I lost quite a few friends on the way because they a lot of my friends still don't hold with it at all, and I'm almost seen as a traitor because I'm not following the cause. But the effect it had on me is astounding. Both me and my wife lost about 20% of our body weight. We didn't expect that, and there were so many aspects of our lives that changed. We became much healthier, much more active. Uh, the cost of living reduced enormously.
Wow.
And yeah, there's no reason for not being excited about it. But it's interesting the way you put it, that we're all subjected to the falsity of the whole problem.
That's right. That's right. And right from a very young age, that this is just the way it is. This is just the way it is. And
Yeah.
like Dr. Will Tuttle often would say in our talks, who wrote the World Peace Diet, he said that most of us didn't know any vegans growing up. So we didn't even
No.
have a role model of what it looked like. But that is changing, and that's changing really fast. And we may lose some friends close by, but we gain a huge community of people that are doing it for all three reasons. They may have come into it for the animals, they may have come in it for their health, like you did, and like I did. I had Crohn's and I went away to a well-known wellness center in the States, and I drank wheatgrass and ate sprouts and lived like that. And 3 weeks later, I was so sick when I went. I used to be a long distance runner before I got sick. And I was so sick when I went, I couldn't even walk the beach. And afterwards, after 3 weeks, I went for a half an hour run. So the
Uh,
body is a self-healing organism, and it's hard not to be preaching it after. It's like, hey, let me give you the good news. Let me give you the good news.
Absolutely.
But the thing is, people have to come to it in their own time. And the conversation I had with Janet O'Shea was, how do we mobilize people? And there's all kinds of ways we do it, but not unless the readiness is there. So not unless the readiness is there. But once we get there, there's no reason not to celebrate. So for me, I've noticed a huge spiritual upgrade as well. I feel more connected to everything being a vegan, all of it. Is that true for you?
Now you put it that way. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. There's
Uh-huh.
no glory in the whole thing of the veganism. But of
Yeah.
course, I still uh, drive through the country and see cattle and sheep herded, and there's a very distressing part of it as well. But nonetheless, yes, I do on the whole thrive. I don't know about the spiritual part of it, but I suppose it is spirituality. Yes, yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, yeah. Which is hard to impart to a meat eater.
Mhm. Yeah, it's hard to infuse the interconnectedness until you actually experience it.
Yeah,
It's something that has to come to us in wholeness and in truth. There's a documentary that was done by a Maori man in your country in New Zealand called Milk, ED, and he was showing that the dairy industry in New Zealand has been a huge contributor in destroying all the water in New Zealand. The rivers are polluted and the
yep,
lakes, and
yep, yep, yep,
and
yep.
so I don't know if you've connected with Chris, but it's
Sorry, what was his name, please?
I'm trying to remember his last name, but his documentary is called Milked, Milked. And his first name's
No,
Chris. I will
gosh.
find his last name. Yeah. And he did a very powerful documentary on the impact of animal agriculture. And it doesn't matter whether you're an indigenous person who maybe ate off the land, including animals, but then there comes a time when those days are over. Let's just put it that way. Those days are over because our wildlife is disappearing and our land is disappearing.
Yeah.
So we're just
Oh, I'll look at. I don't recall seeing that,
okay.
but I'll look for
You'll
it.
enjoy it. You'll enjoy it.
Thank you.
So, what would you like to speak on around your book, Plant Paradigm? I'm sure you tell your story in the book. I haven't read your book yet.
Well, it's a relatively short book, but I'm fascinated I scanned it yesterday to knowing we were having this conversation. And what fascinates me is, generally speaking, I'm a quite a creative person, and I move from one creative environment to another and to another sort of thing as I move through life. And what staggers me is that my enthusiasm for writing Plant Paradigm 6 or 7 years ago it remains exactly the same. And what I wrote then, I've got no question with. Obviously some of the numbers are different, but the principle's the same. And that's quite, for me, I'm very proud of that. Because all that's happened is my interest in veganism has consolidated more and more and more. And I'm still reading voraciously. In fact, I've only recently come across Dr. Will Tuttle, and I've picked up one of his books yesterday, and I'm reading. I get his daily little sermons every day, which I think are staggeringly good.
Oh, that's great.
But sadly, way outside the ken of an awful lot of people I know, because I understand exactly what he's coming from. But if I share it with other people, it goes right over the top of their heads, I'm afraid. But nonetheless, yeah. So my book is just cataloging the three pillars of the three legs of my stool, and how I've come to understand them. And in New Zealand, we've got, I don't know, forget the numbers now, but vastly more livestock than we have humans, and all the effluent and all the damage to the soil and everything else to do with those livestock is untreated and hideously damaging. Whereas the few humans are sadly not well fed. A big percentage of our population are not well fed, whereas all our animals are very well fed. And so the discrepancies are huge. And so my book just points that all out. I think that's what I could say.
Yeah, feeding the animals and letting people starve. Yeah. And destroying the land and the environment.
Yes. And the environment. So much of New Zealand was cleared by New Zealand was a country covered in bush when my ancestors came here 100-something years ago. And now there's just square miles of green pasture, which we've brought up to think is the most fabulous thing. But all the waterways, all the wetlands were drained, all the trees were knocked over. So New Zealand's got a huge problem of native animals that are in verge of extinction. It's a total tragedy.
Yeah, there's a very small percent of the land that's left for wild animals. It's mostly been farmed. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So there's no reason not to go vegan, right?
Sorry?
There's no reason not to go vegan.
No, there's not. But I have an awful lot of trouble convincing even some of my children.
Right.
Because I broke the rules as a father and taught them all to eat meat from a very early age. I've got one daughter that understands veganism. Extraordinary. I had one rang me last week and said, "How do I go vegan?" I couldn't believe my luck.
Well, we're in a huge spiritual upgrade right now on the planet. As much as there's mass destruction, war, and an all-time high of violence and oppression, we also are awakening very quickly right now as a humanity, whether we know we are or not. And so let's not be surprised. It happened to me recently. My son-in-law, I have this ongoing, not really argument, because I'm not really arguing, this ongoing discussion with my son-in-law through my grandchildren. So they come to me and they say they're 5 and 7. Well, Dad said you can't be strong if you're a vegan. And I said, well, you know that's not true. You know how strong your Oma is. And so, well, Dad said that blah, 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 blah. Well, he had a heart scare a month ago. And he was at my home. I rent out my home for retreats and I was away. So my daughter was there cleaning for me. And my son-in-law saw a book on the shelf that said How Not to Die by Dr. Michael Greger. And he picked it up and he couldn't put it down. And he's gone mostly plant-based. And he swears by it. He's lost 11, 12 pounds, and he was convinced that veganism is not the way to go. So it's like, it's such good news when that happens. And
It is.
so it's, as people, as elders, we are here to hold space in a loving way. We are here with our fierce protection for the earth and our grandchildren in a loving way. So being that loving example. And maybe you would like to join the Million Vegan Grandmothers. We're a thriving community of not just grandmothers, but elders that are here to share the message. And we would love to have you come in and speak and come to some of our meetings. Sailesh is part of our grandmother community. So.
Well, I've signed up to it, but I didn't know what I was signing up to. But yeah. And I've got to say that Dr. Salish, is that how you say it?
Yep.
I've only recently come across him, and I just hang on every word he says because he claims that we're all going to be vegan by next year. I can't see that happening. But my claim is that on a scientific basis, dairying is going to be dead by 2030, and that's my. But we're both chasing the same rainbow, aren't we?
Yeah, and does anybody really have the same timeline? I don't know, but I do know, despite what we're seeing on the planet right now, that we're going to live in a different world by 2026. I feel that deep in my heart that there's going to be, and it's not going to be very much fun getting there. There's going to be a lot more chaos. Not everybody comes willingly to change. Some people come kicking and screaming, but it has to be a systemic change. As Janet O'Shea says, she said it has to be, we have to put less focus on the individuals and look at the systems that have been long broken and then invite people into our new system, our new world of compassion and non-harm, right?
Yes, we do.
Yeah.
But it seems from where I'm sitting in New Zealand, that seems a long way off because so many farmers still aggressively farming animals and so many politicians depending on the results of those farms.
Right. Yeah. The smell of money.
But I'm not pessimistic. I just feel it seems like a great big hill we've got to climb.
Absolutely. And I think sharing the information in a non-confrontational way is often helpful. So I don't know if you have a blog or a way of just sharing information like the documentary that was done in New Zealand, Milked. Thank you so much for your time today, James. This has been a great conversation. Your book, Plant Paradigm, is it, where could we find your book?
Well, it's still for sale in New Zealand. I don't have it anywhere else in the world, but it's still for sale.
Well, great. It was really great meeting you. Thank you for being part of our convergence coming up on November 9th and 10th and sharing the journey from being a rancher to being a healthy vegan at 83. Is that correct?
Yep.
Great.
83 and going well.
Great. Thank
you very much. I've really enjoyed the conversation. Really enjoyed it.
Yeah, thank you.